Hi there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cloud-Based Mayhem. My guest this week is Jim Mallinson. Jim is a friend of mine. Many of you know him already. He's part of the Sky Safaris legends, Eddie Colfax and Antoine Laurens and John Sylvester. I did my first tour with these guys back in 2009 when I was just a pup in beer. Came back in 2011 when I was still just a pup and did my first big bivvy, which set off all the bivvies to come with John Sylvester. An amazing flight we did over the back and landed in Manali and slept in the ice and then flew back the next day. Back then, of course, Jim was dreaded out. He has lost those. We'll talk about that. He had dreads for most of his life because of living as a sadhu. A sadhu is someone who's kind of renounced the worldly life. He would spend as much as 6 months of the year in India. His enchantment kind of got hold of him with India, and when he was 18, and spent a great deal of time there, and did spend that 6 months a year every year until COVID hit. But lived as a sadhu, which is basically just wandering around, not doing a whole lot, and then would come back to Oxford in the UK and pursue his academic career, which is boisterous to say the least. He's written 9 books. He's the leading expert in Sanskrit, has translated documents that go back literally thousands of years. He's now a professor. As of September 1st, will be a professor of Sanskrit at Oxford. He is a sir, a doctor, a professor, a Mahant, a Baronet. Some of those I don't even know what that means. I had to look up a lot of words before I sat down with Jim and talked to him about his amazing career. Just fascinating. We talk about all kinds of really quite wild subjects like dissolving the mind. We talk about culture and what Western culture maybe has right, what it has maybe wrong, mental health, and just his incredible, I'm going to say it, although he doesn't like this word, you'll learn about that at the end, his incredible journey of through academics and also flying, of course. He's done some pretty amazing things in the Himalayas, and we talk about some of his more recent exploits because of COVID in the UK, and just a blast. This was a little intimidating sitting down with someone who has so much academic credentials, but we had a lot of fun, and I know you will too. Enjoy this talk with Sir Jim Mallinson. Jim, I feel like we've been trying to do this for years, potentially. It's been a long time since I've seen you. I think where we need to start is the loss of your dreads. You look a lot different, my friend. What we were just talking about in the opening, you've had them for over 30 years. Is that right?
Yeah, that was right. Well, yeah, it was right until 4 years ago, indeed, yeah. I cut them off in Beard, actually, the little temple, going up to takeoff, walking up. That was October 2019. And so, of course, then there was a global pandemic, and there's still plenty of people I haven't seen. So I'm still bumping into people regularly going, hey, what the hell happened? Yeah.
Have you been able to keep up your going to India every year through the pandemic, or did that get shut down? Have you broken your record?
That got shut down, and then I got really jinxed. I was hoping to get back to Beard in October last year, and then there was some fight between the UK and India over visas. I couldn't go. I had to postpone the trip. And then I was meant to go in March, and then my aunt died, and I had to cut the trip short. And anyway, so it feels like I've been slightly jinxed on going to Beard. And now I've got a new job as well, starting in October. So I won't be going this autumn. Anyway, I'm hoping to go out next spring. Fingers crossed. Third time lucky. Third attempt lucky in a year or two. Yeah.
Well, take us back to 88. I've had a fascinating and very interesting and fun morning reading all about you on Wikipedia and everywhere else. And I knew a fragment of this stuff, of course, when we spent our time together in 2009 and 2011 in beer. And we will talk, of course, about your flying exploits and the North-South Cup and guiding and the Sky Safaris and John and Eddie and Antoine and Debu and everybody. But and those of you who are listening, those are all names I would imagine you've heard of, at least in passing. But I would love for us to go back to I don't know if it was before 88. I think you would have been 18. So around there, I read that Rudyard Kipling was your inspiration. You read Kim and you decided I'm going to, this is pre-college, I imagine. I'm going to India. What was the fascination there? How did India just take hold?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of with hindsight, the Rudyard Kipling thing. I don't know if that was really in my mind at the time, but I did have to read it at school. But then in England or in the UK, what we often have, people will sometimes take what they call a gap year between school, which I always get confused. I think you call that high school in the States, and then anyway, we
Yeah.
call it school and university. So at age 7, I was young. I left school at 17, and I was like, what am I going to do in my gap year? And through a weird succession of coincidences, whatever you call it, I decided I was going to read Sanskrit at university, which was already quite obscure. And then a friend had come back after his gap year in India and regaled me with stories of the wonderful time he'd had wandering around. And I just put two and two together and thought, right, this is it. And I went off with a good friend from school, and he's now a professor of Indian philosophy in a university in Delhi, and I'm a professor of Sanskrit at Oxford starting in September. So it kind of messed up
Hmm.
both our lives. Here we are, 35 years on or whatever. That one trip to India like completely set the tone for the rest of our lives.
And can you put a finger on that? What was it? Was it the language? Was it the people? Was it the religion? Was it Hindi? What
Yeah, it
what
was a
was
mixture of everything. Wandering around.
all
You've
of it?
been there. It's so great. I think it was. I think I I'd done Latin and studied history at school, and it's the way in India they've got this ancient civilization which is still going on, still manifest. So you can read all these old texts and so forth, and you can see a continuity today. And in particular, I got into also hanging out with all these. Crazy wandering holy men. That happened in my first trip actually up in the Himalayas. It was at the base camp of this trek up to this huge ice, this stalagmite in a cave called Amarnath up in Kashmir. And I couldn't actually do that because my visa was running out. But I spent a few days hanging out with all these wild chillum smoking bubbas. Who were camped out at the foot of the mountain, and I just thought this is wild, this is great. They kind of, I'm 53 now. I was born in 1970, so in the 80s, like the kind of cultural movements that got me going, still had a bit of hippie stuff going on, and then you had that kind of punk vibe, and these guys seemed to kind of combine the two things together, and I was these sort of charismatic, funny, wild, and also just that sort of don't give a shit attitude. I somehow got off on that, and that got me hooked.
Was there a part of you back then that was, were you rebelling against anything at home? Was there something about living in the UK that just didn't feel right, or was it just, yeah, let's go have an adventure and oh, this is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I was a slightly difficult adolescent, I suppose. I misbehaved a fair bit. I don't know how one would. I don't know how to justify that. But no, it was more of a pull rather than a push. People talk about pull
Hmm.
and push factors. It wasn't like I was running away from anything in particular. It was just had such a good time in India. Yeah, and then I went to India every year, sometimes for 6 months, sometimes for a year, for the next 30 odd years or whatever, until COVID put the kibosh on it.
Yeah, crazy. Are you quite mathematically inclined? I've always heard that linguistics requires a pretty left brain mathematical
I am,
approach.
yes, Gavin. Yeah, I did maths and physics and Latin as my kind of high school subjects
Oh,
before I did
Latin.
Sanskrit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm quite a fan of Wade Davis. I imagine you're familiar with him. He talks about the extinction of language. And I read today that in the early 2000s there were over 7,000 different languages in the world, and they expected that to decrease by as much as 90% by 2050. Is Sanskrit, and I read in your bio, old Iranian, are these languages that are uh, part of that potentially leaving, or are they pretty safe?
Well, they're very different. Those two, they're like the opposite extremes of the
Yeah.
historical record. Because old Iranian, there's only or old Persian. Well, I did a Vestan and old Persian. Old Persian, there's only 600 lines of it in existence, and that's like 2,500 years old. So, but
Oh my
Sanskrit,
God.
Sanskrit is definitely not going to die out, even though it's very old. it's the classical language of India. And of course, particularly the moment with the kind of Hindu nationalist movement, they really promote it. So that's not going anywhere. But there are plenty of languages in India, like up in the mountains where we've hung out, the sort of local dialects and stuff. I think they are rapidly dying out. I mean, they used to say, I don't know what the latest is. They used to say there were 1,200 languages in India, something like that. But Wade Davis,
1,200 in India.
yeah, you mentioned Wade Davis, huge fan. Yeah, and I got lucky to meet him a couple of times in India. Actually.
He's amazing.
Yeah, fantastic.
The navigator stuff, and he's really amazing. Mallinson is best described as perhaps the only baronet to wear dreadlocks. Back to your dreadlocks. What is a baronet?
Oh God, here we go. A baronet is an inherited English title. So I get to call myself sir if I want to. I have a lot of titles, Gavin. It's crazy. We might get on to. I'm also Mahant. I'm professor. I don't know what order they should go in. Doctor. Yeah, crazy. But that one's achieved by doing nothing at all. Which actually nowadays the politicians here just give titles to their mates and their cronies and the people who give them money. So I think it's actually nowadays the most honourable way to get one. I used to think it was a bit ridiculous. I mean, the whole thing's pretty ridiculous, but yeah, so I get to call myself Sir James Mallinson if I want to, and it doesn't happen very often. And in fact, all that seems to result from it is a lot of chaos when I try and check in at the airport because my passport's a mess.
So something I found quite interesting as I was reading about all this, on the one hand, you've got Jim Mallinson, Sadhu, or a yogi. You go to India, you spend months at a time with a small bag and a blanket and living, it seems to me, a very simple life. You're living with the holy men, and you're kind of a vagabond. I guess I don't know if that's the right term.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
On the other side, you've authored 9 books. You're the world renowned expert on Hatha yoga and its origins, which was also fascinating. You're reading texts that are still around from, I think one of them was 1100 or earlier, maybe. Those don't. How do you mesh these two? Are the yogis doing this as well? Or are they doing something in there at night where that we don't know about? I mean, it's you're almost living in 2 completely different worlds, at least from my perspective.
No, you're right. It's absolutely right. It's 2 completely different worlds. But I think I need the 2 to. I couldn't do one on its own. If you see what I mean, the sadhu life. It was never feasible for me to completely commit to being a Hindu yogi. Not least because I've had been lucky enough to have the love of a good woman for more than 30 years, and part of that renouncing all those kind of pleasures. And so I always sustained it with academic inquiry, trying to understand where these guys have come from, what's going on, what are they doing, and then vice versa. The academic stuff would be too dry. I mean, there were famous scholars in my field who never even went to India. They're just reading the texts, and that could never be me. I had to have the living world that fascinates me in order to sustain me through reading old manuscripts for hours and hours on end and so forth. So yeah, the 2 things kind of balance each other nicely.
Is the transition for you quite simple? For me, I haven't lived in your world at all, but right now I'm on vacation, which I've never really done in my life. I was kind of lived as if your life should be something you just want to do. You don't need to go on vacation. But I've been building this house, been working like a dog for quite a long time, and I just needed to get away from the house, get away from the build, spend time with the family. But it's hard for me to be here. It's hard for me to relax. I would imagine, if you're home in the UK, you're with your kids, you're with your wife, you're wrapped up in the things you do at home, writing books and being an academic and getting funding and grants and all these things. And then you go back and you're a sadhu. Are you just there? Do you pop into it? And where I'm going with this is with flying. It's often hard. I think what we love about flying is to be present, right? And it forces us to be present. That's hard to do, at least for me. I think for a lot of people, to be present is tough.
No, I agree. The transition. I mean, got easier over the years, but it's pretty difficult. In fact, I will normally find it more difficult coming back from India and then going back to normal life in the UK. But it got easier over the years, and I'm the same with flying as well. I don't know about you, but like if I've had a layoff for a few months, I feel like a beginner. In fact, I can't quite even believe
Oh
I'm
yeah,
doing it. I'm like, what? I fly that crazy thing,
it's very uncomfortable.
which
Yeah,
but I think that's a good thing, isn't it? I think that's. I always find it amazing these guys. And you interviewed, I can't remember his name, but some brilliant Alpine Triangle guy who goes out 6 hours.
Alex Roby.
Alex Roby, and then there are others.
Mhm.
What's his name? Donini, didn't he? When he was the dad. Uh,
Yep,
he's Luca. Is he Luca? Is the dad?
yep,
Yeah, and he would
yep.
just come out of his hotel job and then go and win World Cup or
Just
something like
win.
that. For me, it takes me a
Yeah.
few days kind of transition just to get into it again, which I think for me
Mm.
is necessary, kind of mentally and for safety and so forth. I think it's probably a good safety mechanism to be daunted by that. But yeah, I guess it's the same. Yeah, it takes a while to transition between the two worlds. But congratulations on managing to take some time off.
Yeah, well, but like I said, it's not easy for me. I'm one of these people. I like to get things done. I
I'm the
like to,
same.
I like to accomplish things, and I feel like, and I keep telling you, I'm accomplishing a lot. Spending time with my family. That's all I came down here to do. I should just do that, but it's
Did
tricky.
you got a wing with you or a kite board or anything?
I brought my tandem, which I got around the time I met you. I've never been a tandem pilot. I've never done it commercially, but I wanted to fly my daughter down here, and we went for a flight the other day, and that was a blast. Very uncomfortable because I'm not a tandem pilot. We were way, way, way underweight. Well, I wouldn't say it was very natural because I was trying to act very natural with my daughter. But you've got when you're flying your family, I found it very uncomfortable for me. Just being overly cautious, I guess, which is
How
probably
old's your
a good
daughter?
thing. She's 5.
Right.
She's just
You
turning
get one of those
6
little
this week.
small harnesses you strap on the solo. That makes it a bit easier. That's what I used to do.
I'm gonna do that now. I shouldn't have a tandem. I should just get a slightly bigger wing. So yeah, that's the way forward for sure. We had no penetration. If there was any wind, we'd be in trouble. How much of your own uh, your studies of hatha yoga and history and meditation and transcendental meditation, how much of these I also read that you don't go to a studio and practice yoga, you never have, uh, but how much of your life is participating in meditation, yoga? How big of a factors are these outside of the academic world for just you personally?
I probably shouldn't make this too public, Gavin, but here I am on your mind. Maybe there's not so much crossover, like you say, compartmentalized lives. I don't know how many of my kind of yoga colleagues and students and so forth will be listening, but I don't not much. I don't meditate a
Really?
great deal. I mean, for me, it was more always the lifestyle. I mean, I've done a lot of yoga over the years, and I've mastered most of the weird techniques that I've read about and published about in these old manuscripts and so forth. But nowadays, I do maybe 20 minutes a day, if that. At the moment, I've been a bit slack recently. Actually, I put my arm out. I think I've got tennis elbow, so I'm not doing the postures so much, and I just sit for a bit. But I'm not super dedicated. For me, it's always been more about the whole sort of lifestyle and
Hmm.
that the life of the yogis. And the reason I got in particular into studying yoga was it was the one aspect of that world I've been living in India that was well represented in Sanskrit texts. Because you were asking, like, do the sadhus and the yogis, are they also scholars? I think was the implication of your question. Actually, quite the opposite. They think that the sort of stuff I do is a complete waste of time. That reading books is a waste of time, and that all you've got to do is live your life and do your yoga and so forth. Um, so I guess I subscribe more to that. But to be honest, Gavin, I'm kind of it actually feels slightly remote, that whole world to me at the moment, because of my guru dying in 2019, which is why I chopped my hair, and then COVID. I haven't really lived in that. I mean, I'm in touch with people, but I haven't lived in that world now for nearly 5 years. I guess, yeah, 4.5 years.
What is Kiwi used to wear a shirt that said I am not your guru. Uh, what does that mean, having a guru? What did that relationship look like? What was it?
Yeah, I guess it sounds weird to some people. They think it means just completely giving yourself over and like being brainwashed and so forth. But it can be that you can commit like that if you want. But it's more being you're being sort of brought into a tradition, a lineage of yogis or whatever. So by being initiated, and I was I didn't even realize I was being initiated with my wife well, she wasn't my wife at the time. It was in 1992 at one of these big Kumbh Mela festivals, which Kiwi used to come to actually. Kiwi came to 2 or 3. He was, got some funny stories about that. Like, I mean, it's the biggest gathering of people in the world, and he turned up one day and couldn't find us, and so found some camp. Some people looked after him. He spent the night. The next morning, he got up and said, "No, typical Kiwi, took a huge dose of acid, and then found us within about 2 hours."
He was just led to you.
Yeah. But there's one of those festivals when we first hang out with our guru, who's very sort of charismatic guy. I don't know if you've seen the movie I made with Dominic West called West Meets East.
No, I'll need a link to that because I read about it today, and I wanted to ask you about Dominique. But
Yeah. It was because it was broadcast on various channels, but I think, and so they were quite careful. I think you can now watch it on YouTube anyway, so I can give you a YouTube link. But so you'll meet my guru if you watch that. He's a very charismatic, good fun guy, and he sort of took us off in the middle of the night and initiated us on the banks of the river, and we really didn't know what's going on at the time. But that then means you're part of this whole extended family, and part of this huge lineage of hundreds of thousands of yogis and stuff all over India. So it's great. It means I can turn up anywhere in India and just show my credentials or say a few words, and I'll be looked after. So that, and in fact, that's one of the I think it ties in with flying. Actually, one of the things I love about flying, I love traveling and seeing new things, going new places. There's nothing I like more than a good cross-country flight where you're going in a new route. It doesn't happen very often these days, but that's what I particularly like in flying as well, is doing new things that I haven't done before. And same in India. So that facilitates, so being part of that network facilitates being able, just to turn up at any kind of temple town or pilgrimage place or something, and you're part of the gang and you can be looked after. Yeah.
Well, we mentioned Kiwi. How much of your journey or being with sadhus or this living as a vagabond, exploring this lifestyle, does that involve, does it involve a lot of drug use? Does it involve a lot of hallucinogenics, or is it mostly just weed? I mean, I know they smoke a lot of weed, but has that been a critical part of your critical thinking?
Maybe it's damaged my critical thinking. I don't know. I definitely smoke plenty of weed with them. Yeah. No, it's a good point, because people think of India as like the it's a very sort of psychedelic place and so forth. But no, there's not a lot. It's not like Wade Davis's books. Is it One River, isn't it, where he follows in the footsteps of what's his name, Evans Schultz, and they're in South America, there are thousands and thousands of different combinations of plants and different psychedelics and so forth. In India, they don't really take psychedelics, actually, traditionally. I mean, there is this, people might argue slightly against it, and there's this notion of soma, which is 3,000 or 4,000 years old, but everyone's forgotten what it is. No one's doing that. And in fact, as you alluded to, it's mainly the sadhus are just sitting around smoking dope. And the interesting thing about that is that the smoking part of it is a new arrival in India as well. It came, like everywhere else, came from the New World in around 1600. So when someone like Kiwi turns up, though, with a pocket full of acid, a lot of the sadhus are quite keen, to be honest. They're interested. They're interested. They'll take it. They'll take it, but it's not kind of a part of the culture.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me about dissolving your mind. I have that in quotes. I read an article that you talked about dissolving your mind.
Well, I guess that's one of the various different ways of describing, the final state of yoga, if you accomplish it properly. Like samadhi, you'll hear the term samadhi, and that's and laya, the Sanskrit word for dissolving the mind is laya. And so you find that in text quite a lot. And normally it just seems to be the idea of a state of kind of no fluctuations of the mind. So you kind of achieve a state of no thought, really, but it's said to be blissful at the same time.
So is this different than I've always been told with meditation, you're looking at a ticker tape, in a sense, of your thoughts, and you're just letting them go. That's, you're not trying to have nothing. You're just, okay, fine, let it go. Okay, fine.
Yeah, that would be a sort of Buddhist mindfulness approach where, Buddhism understands there not to be any self, any permanent aspect of reality. And so it's just a sequence of moments, and you just accept each one and let it go. whereas most Hindu traditions aren't like that, and so they do think that there's a an ultimate reality to our existence, to individual existence, and the most common concept of the kind of the final state of yoga is recognizing that your individual self is the same as the ultimate self of the universe, and if you can realize that identity, then that's enlightenment or samadhi or however it's termed. There are various different terms for it. Yeah.
Mental health. This seems to be a growing topic these days, and it's also a big one in flying. There seems to be quite a bit of mental health. There's certainly anxiousness and depression is prevalent in our community. Is this headlines, or is this something? Do you feel like mental health is declining around the world for various reasons?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't. I can't. I'm no real expert on that sort of thing. But I can't imagine that our kids growing up looking at their smartphones all day long is going to be much good for mental health and looking at other people. But I think also you related it to flying, and I haven't really. You probably thought about this more than I do. But I think there are some particular character types that are attracted to flying, and some of them probably are a bit depressive as well. A bit. I don't know. There's like a few. I'm not going to name any names.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
a few brilliant pilots that come to mind who are also quite sort of dour and not particularly sparky. But there's plenty of others of all sorts. But yeah, I imagine there's quite a lot of UK pilots at the moment with pretty poor mental.
Yeah, I understand you're having some pretty rotten weather.
It's appalling. As I said, right now we've got the first named storm of the year outside Storm Anthony. We've got 50-mile-an-hour winds. Yeah, it's been appalling. I've been lucky actually. I managed to have a few good flights. I've just somehow got timed it well and got out and had some good ones. But I haven't looked at the numbers, but it must be the worst year for many years.
Yeah, I've been hearing that from
I'm on
various
some
friends
groups.
over
I'm on some groups with the keen. We got one called Size Matters for about a dozen of us who are keen cross country pilots around here, and everyone's very glum. It's like people have basically written off the season already.
This is the problem with putting too much weight into flying, isn't it? We've got to have an escape
you need
somewhere
some other
else.
things going on if you live here, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, it can be tough. I've gone down that path quite a lot. I can't remember if we opened up with this, but you're an Indologist. I had to look that up, and I read somewhere that you even have a hard time describing what that means. But it's the academic study of the history and cultures, languages, and literature of the Indian subcontinent. So I bring that up only because I feel like you've spent most of your life really studying culture, language, in a really very different way of living, other than Western culture and how most of us live in Western society, without having to have spent the kind of time you have in academics and studying it and living with the sadhus and living with a blanket and a small bag all these years. What are some things you can impart to me and the audience about what you've learned that would be helpful in our day-to-day life? And what are you teaching your kids? Where do you want your kids to go with what you've learned?
You're putting me on the
I
spot,
know.
Gavin. I feel like I should get Kiwi's T-shirt. I am not a guru. I tell you, my friends and my wife. Well, not my wife, not so much, but my friends for years have been saying, "Jim, you've got to set yourself up as a guru." I'm in the perfect position. I really could, as you know, you read my bio.
Yes.
If I wanted, but it's really not my thing, and I don't want to. I'm not. I've never been one for telling other people how to live their lives. I think we all have to muddle through our own what reality throws at us. So I don't know. What have I learned? What I have learned is if you stick at anything for long enough, you get good at it, don't you? That's one thing. I try and get my kids off the screens, and I try and get them to do stuff that they're interested in and stick at it, and just keep going with it. other life lessons. I know it's terrible. I've by accident, I've found myself in this position of responsibility, and people think I must have it all worked out, but I haven't, Gavin. I haven't, and I've had some very good, exciting, and interesting life along the way. But I'm still puzzled most of the time. I'm still like, what the hell's going on?
Well, I think
I
that
haven't.
that's actually great
I
to
think
hear.
once you've got the answer, you're enlightened, aren't you? That's it.
Right.
And then I'll set myself up as a guru.
Mm.
Then I, but yeah. I mean, you could probably you could tell me, I'm sure, better life lessons than I can
No, I
tell you.
don't. I mean, it's interesting. At your time with the Sadhus, do they have something figured out that we don't?
Well, that's another interesting thing. They live such different lives from us. My guru would never give me like in specific life advice about how to live my life. They would just kind of,
Do
it's
their
more
thing.
living, exactly, do their thing, live by example. Even though the example is not something you can follow unless you're fully committed. So they occupy this position in Indian society, where they've renounced everything. They don't have a job, they don't have a family, they live off donations. And that sounds like they're beggars, but in fact they're valued as long as they are, as long as they do have some sort of charisma or something to offer in terms of just if they play their role in society correctly, then people give them money. People look after them. People like having. We don't have anything like that in our society really anymore. And so yeah, they just kind of live their lives, and that by being with them is seen as a blessing. They're not actually telling you what to do or telling you how to. In some cases they will, but it's almost frowned upon. Again, I was told by my guru, sometimes Bubbas would set themselves up at Kumbh Mela sitting on a bed and preaching, and then the others would come along and throw them off the bed and beat them up and say, you mustn't do that. You're not allowed to. They have a phrase for it in Hindi, gyan dena, basically telling everyone how it is, and they don't like you to do that. You should just get on with your thing and impress people like that rather than telling them what to do. Yeah.
Is this what drove your interest initially in learning Hindi? Is it just so you could communicate better?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I was obsessed early on. I kind of just I taught myself. I mean, I was learning Sanskrit at the same time, and the two things are related. But I was more kind of obsessed with picking up Hindi. Yeah. I've been with Eddie last week. He's been doing Hindi Duolingo.
Really?
Finally, I'll be catching up. Yeah.
Ah, nice. That's fantastic. Yeah,
I mean,
got to get him on the show as well. That'll be a hoot. Um, okay, one more on the spot kind of question. And we talked about Western culture. What would you say if you could pinpoint what have we got wrong versus Eastern culture versus, and that's a massively general question, but again, thinking about your kids, obviously the phone is a tough one and brutal, but what, going forward the next 50 years, what could you say that Western culture could really do an about face when it comes to X?
Gosh, I wouldn't make that dichotomy, that distinction between Western and Eastern culture so strongly. People have this idea that the West is materialist and the East is spiritual and so forth. But there's plenty of materialists in India. They're some of the best merchants in the world. I think half the CEOs of the tech companies in the States are all Indian, aren't they?
Sure.
It's not like
they're very
so.
driven.
I wouldn't make that distinction. In fact, the title of the movie I was telling you. It's a pun because I was with Dominic West, and so we go to. So it's called West Meets East. All right, is the title, but that's a play on a line from a Kipling poem, a poem by Rudyard Kipling, which is like East is East and West is West, and never the twain shall meet. I.e., saying that there is this kind of different, these two totally different cultures. But I wouldn't draw such a big line between the two. And at the moment, to be honest, I don't know. Like my elder daughter's 18. And at this age, she's going to come. We're all going to India in the winter, but so she will do a bit of time there. But her friends and that people aren't so interested in going to India anymore. In fact, India's got a bit of a bad rep, I think, amongst the youth because of this Hindu nationalist government at the moment. They're cracking down on Muslims. They're pretty oppressive, authoritarian, and so I'm maybe we need to teach India something at the moment. I don't. I guess. Sorry, you keep asking me these questions, and I'm kind of completely throwing them back at you, but I don't think I wouldn't. I don't think it's like we've got a lot to learn from India, or vice versa. I think.
In some ways, that's encouraging. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's not clearly you're not coming back to the UK going, "Gosh, I wish they could just do this or that," or it's not maddening to you.
Well, I think there's a a richness of of life that people in India are I think, but particularly people that they're obviously much poorer, and then which means that they're, I mean, not all of them, but people are much more giving of their time and their person. Just going down the chai shop and hanging out can be a lot more entertaining than going down Starbucks or whatever around here. People, there's sort of personal interactions that I find more invigorating. Yeah, there's that, the kind of openness towards other people, which we certainly in England we don't have so much.
The journeys you've done to India over all these years, are you always with your wife? Are you alone, or how is that work? And how did that work with the kids?
Yeah, well, until the kids came along, yeah, she was with me all the time. We had a wonderful life where we lived in this house actually quite near where I live now. We moved in '95, which was the year I started flying, and it was a rented farmhouse with a bunch of friends. And then in October we would say see ya, walk out the door, and come back in April. We would spend 6 months in India, and then first daughter came along, and my first UK win. We had to make a decision: we're going to we're going to live in India, send them to school there, or UK. And we went for the UK. I can't remember why. And so my first winter back in the UK after 20 years was a real shock. Totally, like sitting through the mud and the rain. But that was the same time I started flying, same time I started doing my PhD in '95. So we did that for about, I guess it was until 2009. My daughter went to school, and she was around about then, or 2008, that we started Himalayan sky safaris, because I've been going to Beard for 10 years or something at that point. But I think how it is now with you've got kids that you can't just clear off them for 6 weeks. So part of the justification for sky safaris was earning some money. I've got to go and earn. I didn't have a formal academic job at that.
It was a reason more than just fun.
Yeah. I mean, it was. I mean, I loved the idea, and it was brilliant. And when John agreed, so Eddie and I kind of thought it'd be cool, and we thought, oh, let's ask John how amazing it'd be to get. And when he said yes, it was like dream come true, and off we went. So that was fantastic. But part of the motivation was to do something more, justifiable. That you can explain. It's all right, Donny. I'm not just going off having fun. I'm actually going to come back with a couple of £1,000 or something.
Were you part of the initial forays into Pakistan as well?
No, I've never. Well, I've been to Pakistan. I've never been flying in Pakistan.
Oh, okay. I don't know why. That came up this morning, and when I was looking into you, I didn't know that Eddie was a part of that. I knew John was, of course, with his films and everything, but I didn't know Eddie was.
Well, Eddie had the original movie. I don't know when they did it. It was a long time ago, called Hypoxia.
Yeah,
where he went up. I mean, typical. I think he had the world altitude record at the time. He went up to about 7,700 meters or something. But typical Eddie didn't have the right instruments, or couldn't prove it. Right. I think he had something that told him, but it was probably couldn't get a track off it or something like that. But yeah, they had some crazy trips, and that's how. So I've known Eddie for years, but I didn't really know John, and Eddie and John were friends through that, and then so it was through them the three of us came together to do Himalayan Sky Safari.
Well, and when did that start?
I think that must have been. I think it was. I was looking into it the other day. I think it was 2007. Yeah, because 2006 I made a film with Kiko. I don't know if you saw that, Temples in the Clouds, flying around Beard. Yeah, which has a bit of the Sadhu world in it, and then the following season I think was the first Himalayan Sky Safari.
Oh, so we were relatively early in that. 2009, and then again, and remember, I think in 2011 that's when we did the thing. You guys were starting the tandem Volpiv idea, and which I don't know if that got off the ground, but I don't know how far that went. But remember we brought Thayer Walker, the writer from Outside, and he was the passenger, and Jody was the photographer, and we did that article, and I had my first kind of real incident there. I think you were right there with me, but remember I lost my wing at 360, and terrifying, and I just walked away. It was crazy, but that was a weird one.
We were all breaking it. We couldn't believe it when you reappeared. Like, oh my god!
Yeah, that was.
You had a proper cascade, didn't you?
That was pretty spooky, but I still talk about that one. But yeah, well, anyway, so the 95 was what was the catalyst? How'd you get into flying? How'd that all
It was
get
a
going?
friend of mine, a good friend, really good old friend from school, rang up and said, "Hey, let's learn to paraglide. You can do it on the Isle of Wight, where we've always had a family. My dad was living at the time." And I said, "Brilliant, great. What's that?" I had no idea, and because I'm not like an adventure sports guy at all. Not like you, who's done all this kind of stuff. Definitely not an adrenaline junkie. If I'm flying, if my heart rate goes up, it means something's gone wrong, and I'm not enjoying it. I'm like, we've got to keep this relaxed. Anyway, I was thinking about it actually the last couple of days because I was in the Isle of Wight, and had I realised at the time that the flying school was the opposite end of the island, which isn't very far, but it's an hour's drive. So every time we went to fly, it was like I probably would have said, "Oh no, hang on, that's not going to work out." But no, I kind of said, "Yeah, great, sign me up," and off we went. And I got totally hooked straight away. Claudia, my wife, and Rupert, the other guy, they got into it, but they kind of didn't run with it at all. Whereas as soon as I realised you could stay up. I mean, the first time my feet left the ground, I was like, "Wow, this is amazing." And then as soon as I realised you could stay up and ridge soar, and I was like, "Wow, this really is." And then when I found out you could go cross country, and I think it's that, you were asking earlier if I've got a mathematical brain. I have to some extent, and I think it's that the combination of sort of theory and then being able the kind of flow movement of flying. The two things together just work perfectly for me. And I didn't look back. I got totally hooked straight away.
Huh. And back to the kind of the simplicity of being a yogi versus, I guess flying is quite simple really when it comes down to it, but are these transitions that your brain loves? Is it tricky? Is it?
No, I get quite stressed on takeoff. I mean, it's simple once you're in the air, isn't it? But there's a lot of bloody preparation, a lot of faffing about getting stuff ready. I'm not very good at that. I mean, I like paragliding in that I'm not a mechanical person at all, and the fact you don't have to tweak it, where you just get it out of the bag and off you go. But then remembering how I don't like I had a Cortel Cannibal 2 for a year or two, but there's so many different things to click up, and it's so big. I was like, I can't cope with this anymore. I want it simple on takeoff. I don't like being rushed. But yeah, once you're in the air and it's simple, isn't it? It's just you haven't got much to do.
You won the British 2006, so you were aggro about this for a while. You were competing. You were going for it.
Yeah. No, so what happened? Yeah, 2000. I did my first British Nationals. I learned in '95. That was quite a quick progression. These days, people get good in a year or two, don't they? Because the kit's so good, so much more info out there. But I then we had a British Nationals in Wales, and my first task, they said like a 50k downwinder, but it's pretty strong wind, and I got quite near goal, and then I realised I wasn't going to get there because it was too crosswind to make it. And I thought, well, it's a great day. I've only been flying an hour or two. I'm going to keep going, and I flew 135k, 132k, which at that point, this is 2000, was a big flight. I mean, the British record, it wasn't the record, especially in the UK. The British record, I think, was 170k, Steve Ham. But like, no one flew further than that for about 5 years. And here was me, first comp, you guys. Everyone was like, "Whoa!" It's like kind of just by staying in the air for 5.5 hours, and made my name like that. So that then got me into doing some other comps. And then in Beard in 2003, there was a pre-PWC, and I won the. Yeah, I must have done that on a comp wing, mustn't I? Yeah, I think I did it on a AVAX RSE, and then so that qualified me for the PWC. So I thought I'd do a season of PWC with and I was going around with Nick Grease, funny enough, hanging out with Nick Grease and Jamie Messenger. I mean, it's classic. It was such fun with those two guys.
Oh man,
yeah, hysterical as you can imagine. But the first leg was in Bassano, or what's the place behind it? Feltre. And
was that where Bill Belcourt threw his reserve and ended up in the fence?
I don't remember that. Did you 2004? I don't recall that.
Okay, all right. Was there big gust front one day? It got canceled and everybody was in the air. Was that year?
No.
Okay, different year. Okay.
No, that rings a bell, but no, it wasn't that because we didn't fly until we had 6. It was week-long comp, PWC, 6 days. No, it was terrible weather. Didn't fly. Last day, okay, and they said a regular task. I think it was Bassano. It was a kind of out and return. And so this is my first PWC task. I'm stoked. And I got the I think I just got the AVEX RSE, which is a proper comp wing, in those days, uncertified, all of that. And I got low quite early on with a group of pilots. And then I got out of this hole, and quite a few people landed, and there was just a lead gaggle in front of me, and I thought, right, I'm the nuts, here I am, PwC, I'll fucking have this, right? And this glider had trim tabs and speed bar, and so I let the trimmers full off, speed bar full on, and I'm cruising on this, blasting along this ridge thing and reeling them in, and then suddenly big frontal, and the whole thing just went berserk. I was on top of the wing, and I was all over the place, like virtually looping it, and then I looked down, and I'm not sorting this out, didn't have much room, through the reserve, and then started thinking about trying to pull in the main, looked down, going, oh no, I haven't got much time, and hit the deck, and I was incredibly lucky because it was a steep mountainside with trees and rocks, and then just a small patch of grass. And I hit this patch of grass, and it was winded. And I was like, oh my God, I'm all right. I just got a mobile phone, and I rang Claudia. Claudia was out there, and I told her what happened. She's like, bloody hell. And she came to get me, and I did manage to injure myself walking down to the road. I think I tripped over onto the road and bashed my knee and everything. Anyway, I got back to the HQ that evening, and I think it was Akim Juice was I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I think he was the test pilot for Gradient. He was the factory pilot, and so I got talking to him, and I said, he said, so what happened? And when I told him I'd let off the trim tabs and gone full speed by, he just looked at me like I was a complete moron. I was like, what, you did both? There's no manual coming with these uncertified wings. I didn't know that was a stupid thing to do.
Really fly at your own risk.
Yeah. But I then realized, but through that, I guess I got a minor fear injury, as you would call it. And not too bad. But I kind of realized then that for me, if I was going to compete really seriously, it was all or nothing. As I was saying before, these guys who just fly a few days a year and do brilliantly in comps or these big crosses, I find that very impressive to be able to switch it on and off just like that. For me, I felt that I needed to stay on top of it, and so I kind of eased off. I thought, I'm not going to be doing these big World Cups and so forth. I did another couple of rounds, but didn't do well at all. But enjoyed myself. It was a lot of fun hanging out with Nick and Jamie and the rest of them. I think Kriegel was just starting out in those days. So I can say I did PwCs with Kriegel, but then he got a little bit better than I did.
He's gotten a little bit better than everybody did.
But I kept doing the British. The only comps, like proper comps, I kept doing were the UK legs of the British Nationals.
Okay.
Which, when it's good, is just fantastic. We had one year, 2007, maybe, I can't remember, where we had 4 amazing days, like 100k tasks every day, and some of them landing back at the camp. Anyway, it was just, as you can imagine, fantastic. But too many years, the weather would just completely destroy it. Okay, so it wouldn't happen. And then after, I think it was about 2009, 2010, the comps panel decided they wouldn't have UK legs anymore. They used to have 1 or 2 foreign ones and then 1 in the UK, and they got rid of that. And I didn't like the foreign one. I got fed up also. I'd hate you go to the Northern Alps and sit in the rain for a week. That would just do my head as well. What a waste of time. But I would always commit. I'd always go to the UK ones, and then they stopped it. And so that was when, with Hugh Miller and Jockey Sanderson, we got together and we devised the North-South Cup. We thought, look, there's got to be a way to have a decent competition in the UK. And so the way we make it work is that we don't call the venue until 2 days before. So we fix a weekend, and then so everyone has to be prepared. One day is a travel day, and then we'll all meet online on Zoom or whatever on the Wednesday normally, or Tuesday or Wednesday. Check the weather forecast. Hugh's the main weather guru these days. He loves going through all the charts and everything. And then we'll call it. We might go off to Scotland. We might go to Wales or something. The first or second year we had it right here, because I live at the foot of some pretty good small hills, but you can go a long way when the conditions are right. And so that's kind of my competing these days.
That just sounds brilliant. Everybody I've talked to about Jockey's super excited about everything he ever talks about. So I'm not sure he's the best gauge, but when I've asked Jockey about the North-South Cup, he really lights up, and Russ and everybody. I mean, it just sounds fantastic, and I'd love to come out and join you guys for
Yeah,
that.
well, you open invitation, Gavin, for
Yeah,
sure. You
and
should
that's always in
come to
May, right?
Well, yeah. Well, no, this year, funnily enough, it wasn't in May because Jockey was too busy with various
Oh, the
comps and
world's
stuff.
yeah.
So we set it for July, but unusually, we've done it once or twice before. We had to postpone the forecast. That was really bad.
Yeah, you've had
So
what year?
we've now got it the last weekend in August. So fingers crossed it'll be all right and we'll get something. So we haven't done it this year.
Ah, okay. Okay, so it's totally flexible. You just pick a weekend.
Yeah, totally flexible.
Oh,
Yeah,
very
yeah. I mean,
cool.
and then obviously quite a few people who were able to do the July one can't come, but it's 30 aside. I mean, it's quite informal, the whole thing. Like last time, was it the last one? And we yeah, there's no GPS scoring. We go back to you way before your time, I imagine, Gavin. But we have a big map and we put pins on the board.
Yeah, are you guys
And so
taking pictures of the turn points?
yeah, no, we don't do the pictures thing, but we get everyone. So what we've got, it was pretty close last year, and there's like red pins for the north and yellow pins for the south,
Wicked.
whatever. Everyone has to put their pin in the board, and then Jockey and I stand back and look at it and go, who's won? Who's done better? And in fact, last year it was so close, we ended up having to get a bit of line and going around all the pins and stretching it out, working out whose line was strongest and longest. And,
Screw X
Jockey's
contest. Now
line
you're doing it with yarn.
Exactly. It's kind of we're trying to take the tech out of it, so that people like Eddie can compete
Right.
because they're not very running their instruments. But we smashed records. Loads of times we've broken British records and stuff like that because if you get enough, because all the best pilots like to take part. It's quite competitive to get a place. Although I often get accused of bribery and corruption and so forth. But who gets chosen in the old boys club? But yeah, you know how it is. If you throw enough good pilots,
Yeah.
even on a half decent day off the hill, then
Yeah, magic happens. Yeah.
And then the real crazy magic happens in the evening when Jockey's doing, because it's also now become the prize giving for the previous year's XC League, and so Jockey does all of that, and then we have an auction as well, a charity auction. It's a one time basically that the kind of top UK pilots
Get together. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Well, we're gonna go back to beer, but talking about magic, I had to look this up embarrassingly, considering all the sailing I've done. But tell me about this Solent flight. You flew some enormous distance over the ocean, right? I have that right?
Yeah. I wonder. Actually, I put this out there. I sometimes wonder if it's the longest ever. I'm sure
I've
it is.
never heard of anything longer than that. But I would talk about it. But I would like to get your thoughts on. There have been a lot of people reaching out to me in the last couple of years, seeing cloud streets at sea. And I've spent a lot of time at sea, and I'm pretty convinced that wouldn't work. But it is an interesting phenomenon. You're not getting thermals off the water, obviously, but you're getting. I think if you're close enough to land, it is a pretty interesting. Flying between the Hawaiian Islands, for example. You see cloud streets. There are. You're exactly. You're right. It's just. I can't imagine. Pretty committing.
I don't know if you were probably again before your time, but Richard Westgate, did he ever cross your radar?
Yes. Yeah.
The brilliant UK pilot. Very sadly died. Maybe because he was an airline pilot, and they think it was through poisoning from the air systems in the cockpit. But
whoa.
He was one of these real dreamers as well of kind of crazy flying. He in his not long before he died, he was seriously talking about trying to fly across the Channel, not the Solent, so it's 20 miles or something, using sea thermal cloud streets. I don't know. I mean, he was if anyone was going to do it, and if he thought it was feasible, there must have been some way of doing it. But I'm not sure if anyone's ever managed. But people do use sea thermals here occasionally, but it's normally in winter, isn't it? Spring, I think.
Yeah.
So you have to have a
really unstable, very good lapse rate.
Yeah, something like that. But what I did, so I learned to fly on the Isle of Wight, and I grew up on the Isle of Wight, and we still got a family place down there. So it'd always been my dream to fly down there. And you used to be able to do it. So it's a small island off the south of the UK with the strip of sea in between called the Solent, where you've got Southampton and Portsmouth, big shipping channel. And the far west of it, there's actually quite a narrow channel. It's only maybe 2 kilometres, something like that. And people used to fly that quite regularly in hang gliders and then early paragliders. But then there's a new airport, Bournemouth, and they closed down the airspace. It's impossible to do that now. So the only way to do it is to the east, where it's then about 6.5 kilometers wide, something like that. And also getting there is tricky. So what I had to do, and I tried a few times, but I would get to Portsmouth. You have to it had to be a nice northerly, but not too strong, because you'd have to loop around. I could put the link to the flight in the notes.
That'd be great.
You have to loop around Southampton airspace and then come back into Portsmouth, which is where you then decide, right, am I going to go for this or not? And I think I'd done it 2 or 3 times, got there and thought, no, I didn't have the bottle. It didn't look right. So this time, it was a couple of years ago, I guess, maybe 3 years ago, maybe more. Time has gone weird, hasn't it, with COVID? Maybe 4 years ago. Anyway, and I've done it once again since. But so all the way around along, looking at the island, you can see cumulus over it, thinking, okay, it still works, because the worry is the sea breeze. And the time that I did it first, I got to Portsmouth, and I can see that the clouds are dissipating, but I'm at about 3,500 feet, and I had a reasonable tailwind, and I thought, so, it's now or never. I've got to go for it. But having said that, I wasn't very well prepared. Didn't have a radio, didn't have a life jacket. But it was all a bit crazy. But I thought this is looking good. And for about half of the crossing, I was just like,
no problem.
Easy. Right. And about halfway across, I hit the sea breeze. So my glide went from probably 15 to 1 or something, a bit of a tailwind, reasonably buoyant air, to, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 to 1.
Oh God!
And then I'm like, shit. Sitting up in my harness, you know how it is when the thing you don't want.
The thing you shouldn't do is what you're now doing, and you can't help but not do it. Yes.
I'm like, and that period was only a couple of minutes where I wasn't certain, but I was looking down, looking at boats I might be able to land on, that kind of thing. As I say, it's a big shipping lane. But then I realized I was going to make it. But I only had 500 feet when I got to the other side.
Oh, that's got it pretty tight.
Yeah. So, and I think it was 6.5 kilometers. I wonder, if anyone's done a thermic flight that's involved, that long a crossing.
I've never heard of one. Yeah, it
would be possible. It would be possible, but yeah. So,
that's pretty exciting.
The second time I did it, I was a bit more sensible. I managed to, well, I don't know if I was more sensible, luckier, but I connected the other side as well and was able to carry on thermally. And,
Would you, if you had everything perfectly planned, would you have a cutaway? Would you have a chase boat? I mean, what we don't want to do is have people listen to this start flying across the ocean. Water tends to be a little dangerous. But would there be ways to mitigate some of the risk? I've thought about this a little bit, because the worst thing is just if there's any waves at all whatsoever, you're in deep shit if you're in your gear. But I guess you could.
Sure. And I guess chase boat with a radio.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be like IV over a lake or something.
Yeah. If it's not too rough, that'd be fine, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Must have been beautiful.
It was. I was definitely screaming with joy when I realized I was going to make it. It was amazing. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Funnily enough, I wrote it up for cross country, and it's going in this new book they've got coming out.
Oh, cool! I just saw Hugh's newsletter yesterday about that. That looks really neat.
Does that mean you've got a story in there as well? Then
No. I don't. No.
Because he said I got sent a thing. The authors. I got 2 stories in there. I'm feeling very
wicked,
privileged.
Yeah, cool. I think all that's more of that's before my time. It's the legendary stuff, and I can't wait to read it. It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, it should be good win to read.
Speaking of just really memorable flights, I asked Debu about this as well. You've done a lot of flying in the biggest mountains in the world, and beer is pretty special. Anything that's still just, love to do that one again. I mean, the magic of flying is they're never the same, but any really memorable flights from the Himalaya that...
Yeah, well, I mean, as I haven't been there for a few years, and things have progressed so much. So the really memorable flights that I've got, people are now doing the same thing, like flying to Manali. You did it with John, didn't you?
I did.
I mean, that's an amazing flight, isn't it?
I mean,
but people are now doing that and back regularly. I think.
Yeah.
But the first time I did that was incredible. I mean, often it's not the biggest or the longest flights that are the most memorable, is it? I mean, one of my first flights there was with Bob Drury and Rob Whittle, and just flying into the back with them. And I was really green at that. I'd only been flying 2 or 3 years at that point, and they kind of convinced me to follow them over the back into the map. And they were all prepared for camping out, and I bottled it. I said I didn't have any kit or anything, so I flew back to beer. But I'll never forget that.
I didn't realize beer had so much history. I was about to ask you a stupid question, who kind of pioneered it. But I remember I had Larry Tudor on the show, and they used to have hang gliding comps there. He had this amazing story of they all took acid. It was I can't remember if they'd gotten to goal and took acid, or if it was a non-flyable day and they took acid, and they were all driving down the mountain, and the driver had he had a little guy next to him who, because the brakes didn't work, and the little guy would have to crawl down in a hole to activate the brakes, and the brakes went out or something, and they're going down this mountain and everybody's on acid and having this amazing trip, and Larry's tripping too, but at the same time still had some of his senses about him, going, no, listen, this is super sketchy. We don't need brakes in this freaking bus. It's a hysterical story, but I don't know what decade that
Yeah,
was.
that
It
was
was,
the 80s, I think. I think
yeah.
that was in the 80s.
I mean, so they've been
Yeah,
flying
but
beer a
I
long
got one
time.
or two. Yeah, and then the first paragliders. I mean, because I started flying in '95, but that was when I started doing my PhD as well. So I was always kind of tied up in the autumn. So I didn't get there until '99 or 2000. So I felt like a bit of a late arrival. But even in those days, it was still like, maximum 10 pilots on takeoff.
Wow.
Everyone knew each other.
Really?
It was a tiny little gang. Nowadays, I think last October, Eddie's saying it's probably 400 or 500 over the course of the season. Yeah.
Boy, that'd be a
So it was still
chaotic
very
launch. I mean,
quiet.
it was a chaotic launch when I was there in 2009. And that's one of the more stressful launches I've ever been on. Yeah, just because
Yeah.
there's no wind, there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of screwing up. It's just, I don't want to watch this. I don't want
Yeah.
to watch this. I just want to get off the hill.
Yeah. But I think they've massively landscaped it
Oh, okay.
since last time I was there, they'd already done a bit. But I think they've done more, so it should be a bit easier. But in terms of memorable flights, there was one amazing flight with John, which was also written up in Cross Country, which he wrote up, I think. So I don't know if it's gone in the new book. But I was, as part of the whole Yogi spiritual trip, there's a mountain there in the back to the northwest called Mani Mahesh Kailash. And it's so Kailash, you would have probably heard of Mount Kailash in Tibet, but actually there are a few Indian mountains that have a good claim to be the original Mount Kailash, and this other one might be it as well. That's a whole other long story. Anyway, I'm determined to get there or to get close up to it, and so it was with Eddie and John and another guy called Dean Crosby, actually brilliant British pilot, and we camped out on the quite high up on the Dauladar. We'd flown out and bivvied, and then the plan was the next day to take off early, because often it's difficult to get high on the main range later on in the day as the cloud comes in, as you know. And so the plan was to take off early and then go over the back to Mani Mahesh, to this holy mountain. And yeah, we managed to do it. It was looking a bit sketchy, but I was just like, again, it was a bit like the Isle of Wight flight. It's now or never. I'm never going to be in such a good position. So I just lobbed over, and only John followed me. Eddie and Dean were like, those guys are crazy. And we did get a bit flushed, and anyway, then had a really, really amazing flight up to 5,500 meters, and got up pretty close to this holy mountain. And then there's a lake at 4,000 meters, which is a big pilgrimage place. In fact, John said he'd never seen it, and I got photos of it, and he was, I can't believe I didn't notice it again. Anyway, we then flew on round and landed. I had the sketchiest landing of my whole life. I think it was kissed the ground in this tiny little gorge above the town of Brahmore, which is in a gorge itself, and the wind was just switching everywhere. But that was then. It was somewhere with this town of Brahmore, which is a long, by road from Beer, it's about 10 or 12 hours or something like that. We got there in, a couple of hours flying, hour and a half. But I needed to go there for a research project I had on at the time. So we then spent a couple of days, because there's these amazing 7th century temples there. And we spent a couple of days, and I was looking around all of that. And then we got a cab back, which I was able to charge to my university research account.
Nice.
Fieldwork trip, of course. But you reminded me of that, because we were driving. The driver was lethal. He was like 50. He was probably 55. I think he was ex-military, but had been a taxi driver, he said, for 10 or 20 years. He just drove so fast, and I kept losing it with him in Hindi, and would give him a load of grief and say that this is just ridiculous. Stop it! If you keep this up, I'm going to have to take over. Blah blah blah. You're going to kill us. And then I noticed that he was driving with one hand kind of tucked in his lap, and he was changing gear with his right hand as well as steering. I said, "What are you doing now?" And he said, He said, I thought if I drove with only one hand, I might drive a bit more slowly.
Some of I'm sure you've experienced way more than I have, but some of the taxi rides I've taken in India are quite harrowing, especially in the cities. It's just, how does this possibly work? I mean, in Lima, Peru, was the same. I remember the first time I really started traveling down to South America. You can drive on these, where there's 3 lanes, and yet they've made 10 lanes out of it. You're going, good God, they're so close to one another and so much speed. It's very impressive.
Yeah. Well, because I actually found at the end of my last trip in 2019 was not my last, but that trip when I cut my hair, I had to give back my Jeep. I don't know if you remember my Jeep. I had that black car.
Yeah.
I put over 100,000 kilometers on that, but people used to. I had it for 20 years. It's very sad to give it back. But people would always say, aren't you scared driving yourself? And I said, well, it's safer than letting someone else drive.
yeah, for sure. Do you guys still have the house?
No, I had to give that back as well in 2015 or 2016. The guy who owned it, the landlord, he retired and said he took it on.
Yeah. That was precious.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
That was amazing.
That was some of the best times of my life.
But the Colonel's still there.
Colonel's still there. Yeah, and his son Vikram taking over. Yeah, I'm hoping, as I say, get out there next spring. I think.
Yeah. Do you typically fly? You're out there for typically 6 months, but do you mostly chase the spring now or the fall? And I mean, I know for the guiding you always did the fall, but for you personally.
Well, I think I'm going to go back in spring. I mean, I think, and I'm more, as I say, Gavin. It's kind of it's been 3 or 4 years since I was there, so it's a very weird time for me. But I probably would prefer to go in spring these days. It's quieter, isn't it? It's less. But you need to go for a long time. You don't. Things you go in the autumn, a very short window of a month or whatever it is. But you can pretty guaranteed that out of 30 days you'll get 28 days flying or something like that. Whereas spring, there's a good chance you'll sit around for a week at some point without any decent flying. Then a good day will come along. But yeah, I'm hoping to get back there. Hopefully with Eddie actually next spring.
Are you guys going to keep guiding when it opens back up?
I'm not. I'm too
busy.
Too busy with other stuff. But Eddie's been. But Eddie, I think I don't know if he's still going to be doing Sky Safaris, but he's now working with Foram. I can't remember what that company's called, who work with Jockey.
Yep.
Yeah, so he's still doing a bit, and Debu and Antoine, they're all doing their stuff.
Yeah.
I have to bow out.
All those years of guiding, I've never guided. I've always been nervous about that. I just trying to help other people. I don't know. It just makes me nervous, especially in big mountains like you guys have done. What are the what one thing from guiding has been most important in your own flying, your own survival, your own risk management?
It's a very good question. What did I learn from guiding? I can't think of a good answer. I mean, I really enjoyed setting things up. I got bored of it after a while, to be honest. It became setting. I don't know about you, but I like setting things up. I like new things, starting things up, and it was so exciting. It was so brilliant to do that, especially with John and Eddie. We're pretty good trio. We all had very complementary, different skills, I think. And amazing to fly with John. I mean, I learned a lot from flying with John. Actually, I don't know if that wasn't necessarily because of the guiding, but the way you must have experienced this, the way he could, what he would call it, milking it. Fly super close to the trees, just soaring along ridges without turning. Yeah, we used to play around that kind of stuff. You'd have to go back and pick up clients, and then you would play around, actually being quite competitive with each other sometimes, and who could do the least turns and in the whole process of guiding. But we had a lot of fun. What I really enjoyed as well was setting up the 360 camp. That was the sort of thing. I don't know if anyone's done anything similar anywhere else in the world, but India is just the perfect place to do it. And we had the Colonel's guys. So people listening, just to explain what that was there was a place very easy to top land, it's only about 15k east of the Billing takeoff. And in fact, it figures in the film. It's the first place that Kiko and I stay in the film. We made Temples in the Clouds. and then no one was hanging out there. We gave it the name 360. But what we would do with our clients when we were guiding is you get the colonel to go up with his guys and set up a camp, and then we'd fly in, and we'd land on the top, and there'd be cups of tea waiting and a lovely campsite, and they'd make beautiful dinner in the evening. We had a bit of a party, big bonfire, and then the next morning you take off and fly off, and sometimes we go off in a different direction. Often everyone, but the amazing thing about beard is people who are pretty inexperienced, hadn't done much flying, they'd still be, you'd still be able to, especially if you're doing one-on-one. It's amazing what you can do one-on-one with people who have not got much experience. And so often people would be they would be stoked enough just from that they'd want to fly back to Beard. But other times we would then, lob over the back and maybe try to fly to Manali or whatever. But I think that, that was really exciting being able to set that up, which was I think probably unique. I don't know if any other guiding company in the world has managed to do that. Maybe in the Alps, I suppose you could do stuff with huts and so forth. But also the thing about Beard is the weather's so reliable.
Yeah, that's the thing about the Alps is it's not reliable like that, especially in the fall. I mean, it was just so accessible and special to land there and then have the donkeys come up and everything set up. It's a really cool way to get a bivvy experience, having not have done any bivvying, or top landing for a lot of people, I think,
Luxury bivvy.
Luxury bivvy. Yeah, no.
But that was where you fell out of the sky, wasn't it? And that wasn't even top.
No, it was, we had all top landed there, and then it was, relatively strongish. I don't know if I would think that these days, but it was to me back then. And John and I took off again, and I was basically just, you were just talking about learning and guiding. I mean, hard to say now, that was a long time ago, but I feel like I learned more from John following him around than anybody I've ever flown with, partially because I could never understand him. He would say things on the radio, and it was always just pure excitement and no words, just blah. He was so excited, and so you just had to kind of follow him. And like you say, I was a very pup pilot, but I just loved being able to follow him around the sky. And I think it was that trip that I did the trip with him to Manali in the back, and that was just mind blowing. But that day, yeah, we took off, and I was just turning away from the hill, and you remember there was that gully to the left side coming up, and something just hit me. I have no idea if this is the case, but we later learned that wing, that wing had been in the ocean a lot. I had done a lot of towing with that wing on the boat, and that was what was the Gin Rebel, I think it was the C, and I think it was radically out of trim. And so I like to think that was part of it, but I don't know. But yeah, I took a big hit and was kind of helicoptering, as I remember, and then I hit the ground, and I had this thought at one point I should throw my reserve, but it was quite windy, and then I panicked because I thought I'd get blown over the back, and I kind of got it a little bit stable, as I remember, but still very much in deep stall, and hit one of those little flat, terraced areas with grass, and it was like landing like a kitten. It was just totally, so obviously enough of the wing was, I think at that point I was kind of, you guys couldn't see me, and so everybody just thought I must have just cracked the ground. And it was just, I mean, right before I hit, I thought, oh wow, this is really gonna hurt, and then it didn't hurt at all. So there was obviously enough wing. I was probably so scared that I had the wing perfectly in deep stall. I had my hands way too low, and it was just holding there nicely. And so, yeah, just chalk that one up to pure luck.
Yeah, we were very, very pleased. Well, I think someone ran over there and said on the radio or something you were okay, but yeah, it looked sketchy. I remember.
Yeah, it was.
And that big. I mean, it was. I think I got, like, going back to the whole the Himalayan sky safaris thing. It was great, and people had such wonderful experiences. The looks on people's faces. But once we got to a point. I mean, Eddie's always up for doing more crazy adventures, but I kind of thought that. I mean, crazy adventures with the clients, pushing it further and further. And I was always trying to rein him in a bit. And also, I think we got to the limit of what we could do. And then, as I say, I like setting things up. And when it became more kind of management, and it felt like risk management, we had a few accidents. We had one lovely guy, poor guy, Norwegian guy, got killed.
I was there.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That was that year.
It was that year.
Of course.
Yeah.
So after that, then it just becomes more, you become worried about it. A bit like what you were saying, you probably didn't, you're just worrying about the clients. And this is paragliding. We know anyone can get hit. It wasn't anyone's fault that Stein crashed, but it just became more stress than fun. I think.
What percentage would you say has, back to 95? Let's just take your life from 95 to today. What percentage of your life is academics and study and writing, and your life outside of flying versus flying?
God, in recent years, much less flying, Gavin, than before. I mean, I haven't done much traveling for flying. I mean, I live in a brilliant place for flying. As I say, in the Marlborough Downs, it's kind of used to, literally, I can walk to a takeoff. It takes me about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Got a short up a hill, and the British hang gliding, paragliding records used to be from there. Now that it's gone a bit further, but there's scope for about 260k or something. So I will go out if it's good. I go out as much as possible. But this season's been pretty terrible, and like I said, I haven't been to Beer now for 3 or 4 years. Hoping to get back out there for a good stint next spring. As I keep saying, I'm worried I'm going to get jinxed on that. But yeah, there's the North-South Cup. So I'm a keen cross-country pilot through the season. But again, I've got family and things, so quite often you have to grit your teeth, grin and bear it, and try not to look up at the sky because And nowadays, of course, you can bloody track everyone, and all that's torture if you've got to be sitting on some boring Zoom meeting, isn't it? You can click over XCRT, whatever it is, and watch people having amazing flights. But I've been, like I say, this year I got out. I've had three really good flights, and that's kind of enough, isn't it? It keeps you. I find nowadays, like, in fact, I almost feel if you get a really good one or two in at the beginning of the season, it's like, oh shit, now I'm just going to be completely hooked all summer. It's harder to ignore once you've had a bit of a fix like that. Then you just keep wanting to have it. But at the same time, as long as you keep getting 1 or 2, 3 fixes of amazing flights a year, maybe 4 or 5, I guess, then that's enough to sustain me.
You've heard this one on the show, but I love it, and so do the listeners. If you could go back to your 50-hour self, which I'm assuming is 95, what would you tell that? Let's see, you were born in the 70s. Yeah, what would you tell that 25-year-old self if you could?
Well, it sounds like an arrogant thing. I don't know if anyone has said this in response to this question before, but the fact that I'm here, touch wood, I haven't broken anything, and I've had a lot of fun. I've met some of my best friends, still through flying, like Eddie Hugh's godfather to one of my daughters. I've met amazing people, amazing friends, and I haven't hurt myself. I've had a lot of fun, still having a lot of fun. So I wouldn't change a thing, to be honest.
Perfect.
I don't regret, when you see all these comp reports these days, I will follow them. I kind of, check in. It's been a PwC in Turkey. I don't know what it looks like. Just scared the pants off. I tell you, there's no, I wouldn't want to do it. That's not my idea of fun. And in fact, I've been realizing more and more I like to fly on my own. I don't know. It's an interesting thing. You talk about getting into a flow state as well. So the whole gaggle flying is not my cup. Even when I go out with groups of friends here, I'm very competitive, which I think is partly the reason why I don't want to do competitions, because you can't sort of guarantee you're going to win for a start, and it just kind of interferes with my head. And I find I have I've gone away from the question, but I have my best flights when I'm on my own, and I can get into that sort of flow state, and it feels like everything's just everything's right. And if there's other people around, I'm comparing myself with them. And there's plenty of people here that, in fact, the people who are super keen, who will go to the takeoff the day before, and in the hope of a good flying big groups, and they all like being on radio and sticking together the whole way. But that's not my thing. But yeah, to go back to your question, I wouldn't change a thing. I don't think.
Yeah, I like that.
And I think if I'd gone too professional on it as well, I would have got sick of it. I don't think I could be like a tandem guy doing tandems nonstop through the summer. I think I'd give up flying pretty quickly.
I think finding that balance seems to be the key as the years go by. We can't all, we're human. We can't have that itch and scratch, that need and passion that we have when we first discover it. That's not going to stick around. We have to fly for different reasons and have to find the passion in other ways. But Okay, I haven't done this. I'm kind of excited about this with you. I haven't done this in at least over 100 shows. If you listen to any of the early ones, you might remember this, but I used to do this, the Proust questionnaire. It just seemed appropriate with you. But it's interesting that I used to do it because I found, these questions somewhere, and they weren't the questions that are the actual Proust questionnaire. I don't know where they came from. So this one has some of the real ones that were actually from Proust, but not others. I've kind of thrown in a little mix, but so we'll take these and then I'll give you back your time because I've held on to it for a long time here. But your favorite qualities in a man?
Oh, gosh. Favorite qualities in a man. Well, there's lots. My favorite quality. I mean, reliability. I mean, I think one's friend, being able to depend. I mean, that's almost the definition of a friend, isn't it? Someone you can, if the shit hits the fan, you can give them a call and they'll help you out. Someone who's there for you. Enthusiasm, being up for stuff. Like, it's so great hanging out with Eddie. Like, I've been hanging out with Eddie. Eddie's just always up for doing the next thing. I mean, it always drives you mad, like after a few days with him, I was exhausted, and one evening I just want to watch a bit of TV, and he's like, "Come on, let's go. I just want to be on out for a telly, please." Backgammon, backgammon. Come on, another bit.
So much energy. Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, but it's fantastic. It just makes life worth living. Then it makes life, it's doing stuff. Yeah, I guess, is that it?
Yeah, perfect. Favorite qualities in a woman? Imagine you think about your wife. What do you think about this? It sounds like you have an amazing relationship.
Yeah, well, that's I could get in trouble answering that question.
Of course. Don't worry, nobody listens.
Well, you've kind of pinned me. I should say the same thing, shouldn't I? I mean, without if I be sexist. I mean, there's an
academic.
A woman in general is. I've got a wife. I'm thinking about my wife. She's also a mother. She's extremely dependable and reliable and always there for everyone in the family. Absolutely. Maybe not so much up for crazy fun all the time like Eddie, and that's probably quite a good thing.
Yes, right. Back to balance.
Yeah. I guess it's kind of loyalty sounds a bit patronizing, but dependability. Something just I think that's what you want in your everyone who's there, everyone who's part of your circle. Yeah.
Another one from the actual questionnaire: your idea of happiness, and then the flip side, your idea of misery. And happiness, is a weird word, but joy. However you like to think about happiness.
Well, I wish you'd prep me with these guys.
There's better on the spot.
Because you always ask another question, which I have prepped. I hope you're going to ask that final question.
Remember, we can edit. You can think about this.
No, I've got an answer for that. Hang on, what was it? What a happiness? Well, they kind of flip side in that, like I mentioned earlier, I love new stuff. I get, I think it's why I'm a researcher. I'm constantly trying to find out new stuff, and I like changing my mind. I like being like, having to realize I was wrong. There's nothing more exciting than that. There's nothing. It's awful to be sort of fixed and certain of your opinions. There's nothing better. But even in my academic world or in life generally, like new stuff, having to reappraise the situation. So I like change and stimulation. So that's my idea of someone has been at my happiest driving my Jeep in India to a new place, whether it's a new flying site or a new temple in the middle of nowhere or something like that. For me, that's perfect happiness. And so the flip side is, man, I hated lockdown. There's people who say they like lockdown, and that I really, I need to get out there, be stimulated, be doing new stuff, and I don't believe these people who say, "Oh, I love lockdown. It was great," but maybe it's true. So yeah, for me, happiness is development, progression. Just new stimulation, which is maybe not. Maybe it could be conducive to poor mental health, and that you constantly. I mean, I've always been like that. At my school, when I was really small, when I was like 4 or 5, they sussed out that the one punishment that would really annoy me was make me sit on the stairs and with no books or anything and just have to look at the wall.
Aren't you thankful that guys like us, when we grew up, because I was born in '72, that they didn't have ADD. You couldn't be diagnosed. No one was ADD back then. But I spent half of my youth in the principal's office. I mean, I would, if I was born in the '90s, they would have put me on Zoloft or whatever that stuff is.
Yeah,
I'm so thankful they didn't
Ritalin.
have that back then. Because I wasn't being fed sugar. It wasn't my diet. My mom was great. She was a great cook, and I had great food. So it wasn't that, but I was just a kid behaving like a kid. And I think now it's just, oh, that kid's too hyped up. We're going to have to put him on something. I'm glad they didn't have that back then.
Yeah.
Least favorite word.
Least favorite word at the moment. I don't like that the very common metaphor journey. When someone says you're on a journey,
And I used that already a couple times. Shoot.
No, I know you. Well, I would have noticed. You see, I don't think you've used it in this interview. How where you've got to in your paragliding journey. I don't know why something like that. Really,
interesting.
That's a very trivial, minor one, but it's kind of
I like it. Good.
Cliches. I don't like.
And here's where we'll end. Favorite word.
Oh gosh. Favorite word. Wow. Did you really? Because I thought I listened to the early ones, and I
No,
don't
these are
remember
different. Yeah, like I said, I actually looked up the real Proust question. And this was part of, at least according to Wikipedia, these are the questions that were on that one. So they're very different than what I used to ask.
Oh man, I can't think of anything right now. Favorite word.
It could be Hindi.
Hindi. Yeah, there's some good Hindi. Yeah, but there will mainly be swear words and Hindi words. That's true. Actually, there's lots of good Hindi words. Yeah, they normally be terms of abuse that my guru used to use that would make me laugh. Makloof. Or what else? Or some place names.
You said place name. I thought of Denali for some reason.
Yeah, I was thinking of a place called Dhinodhar, which is somewhere I really like. I'd love to fly from, a mountain in southwest Gujarat in India.
There's some nice place names, aren't there? It's beautiful.
Yeah, Dhinodhar. That's a place that conjures up lovely images for me. But I could have a whole other podcast. I could talk to you about that.
What's it called?
Dhinodhar. It's a volcano in India where a yogi's meant to have stood on his head for 12 years in this really wild place, really remote in the far south, far west of Gujarat. Cool. Yeah. So is that it? Don't you normally ask some question about what's the craziest thing you've seen?
Let's do that one. Sure. Yeah.
Can I do that? I did have one prepared because this is a story I want to get out of that.
Yes.
It's a short. Don't worry, it's not too long, but it's something I remembered the other day, and I think it was actually written up in a cross country years ago. So it would have been about 2005. And this is not an India story. This is UK. In fact, we took off just from my house with Hugh Miller and Jerome Maupoint. We had this fantastic flight. It was called Harvest. It did this fantastic spread in cross country. It was this time of year, but it didn't look like it's the bog out there at the moment. It was a lovely golden harvest season. And we did a great cross country flight of about 120k or something. I can't remember, up to the Malverns, with Jerome just taking pictures all the way. And there were crop circles. So where I live is like the capital of crop circles. There's lots of ancient monuments, and the hippies, like my local pub is a sort of where all the very interesting gatherings of people throughout the summer. So you got these wonderful shots. Anyway, we were about 100k out, and Hugh was in front of me, and I think Jerome and I were behind, and I was looking at Hugh, and then suddenly this sailplane comes screaming in from the right, goes under Hugh, loops him.
What?
And carries on. I was like, what did I just see? What? And then we finished the flight, and we had hitch, whatever, retrieve, got on a train. We're on a train back, and a text message comes into Hugh from Richard Westgate, who I mentioned earlier, whose brother Guy Westgate was the pilot, was a sailplane aerobatics pilot, and so Richard texted saying, 3 paragliders, southeast of Malvern, 3 p.m. My brother says hi.
No way! Are you kidding me? So, did he just see you guys and do it, or was he tracking you on some kind of
No,
F-alarm or
he
something?
just he must have just seen us. He must have. There was no tracking in those days. This
Holy
is
shit!
2005 or
Oh, this is
something.
a while ago. Okay.
Yeah, but he would have known that his brother would. His brother Richard was just like the guru of cross country paragliding in the UK. Always wanted to know what people have been doing and stuff. So he knew that his brother would know who it had been, and so he must have after he
That
landed.
is
And said,
awesome. What?
I thought I thought I'd imagined it. I just see this sailplanes around
And
here.
sketchy at all, or just total? Oh yeah, clearly he's got us. He's not just. There's plenty of
Yeah, I
distance.
mean,
It was totally cool.
enough distance, enough margin. Yeah.
People ask that all the time, how sketchy it is flying with sailplanes. I just find it so. I've never had a situation ever with a sailplane that was. Cody Matank told a story on the show that was the funniest ever I'd ever heard. They were flying across. They were trying to make it to Moab, so they're out in the middle of the Utah desert, and he's up there at almost 18,000 feet. It's a big day, and he's freezing cold and shaking hands, and his visor's icing up, and it's 18,000 feet. It's paragliding at 18,000. It's kind of sketchy and wild and cold and turbulent. And this sailplane, just cruises at the cloud base, just goes by him, and he's thinking, that guy's probably just listening to Bach, just cruising along.
Exactly. Yeah.
But they seem to be, I don't know, I'm always very encouraged when I see sailplanes out there. You see a lot of them, of course, in the Alps, but I always think of it as a good sign. They're beautiful.
Yeah, but I get a bit nervous at cloud base.
Yes.
Into cloud.
Yeah.
I've seen a sailplane in the last half an hour, because I sometimes go a little bit into cloud. Yeah, because they all radio each other, don't they? In fact, that reminds me of another. One last thing.
Excellent.
This is a stupid thing with Eddie, Crazy Eddie. A few years ago. We were in a thermal going up just off a hill near here, and so it's one of those lovely calls when you're opposite each other, and there's the two of you going up like that, and we're getting near cloud base, and Eddie shouts over, "Jim, let's hold this pattern and take it in." I'm like, oh, you lunatic! I think no effing way. I'm out of here. See ya.
We'll just keep it up.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you left, Jim. That's good. That would be terrifying. Can you imagine? Yeah. You just wait a minute. I don't know where I am. I don't know where he is. Excellent. Jim, what a treat. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Thanks for making the connection come together. We're on different sides of the world right now, but I really appreciate it. That was a blast.
Not at all. It was an honour. Thanks a lot for asking me on, Gavin. I hope you get to see you. Come and do the North-South Cup.
Yeah, I'd love to. In late August, that might be tricky. I'll still be down here, but I will join you guys one of these years. That'd be a hoot.
May next year it will be.
Yeah. Perfect. I'll do that.
All right.
Thanks, bud.
Thanks.
If you find the Cloud-Based Mayhem valuable, you can support it in a lot of different ways. You can give us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher, or however you get your podcast. That goes a long ways and helps spread the word. You can blog about it on your own website or share it on social media. You can talk about it on the way up to launch with your pilot friends. I know a lot of interesting conversations have happened that way. And of course, you can support us financially. This show does take a lot of time, a lot of editing, a lot of storage and music and all kinds of behind the scenes cost. So if you can support us financially, all we've ever asked for is $1 a show. And you can do that through a one-time donation through PayPal, or you can set up a subscription service that charges you for each show that comes out. We put a new show out every 2 weeks. So, for example, if you did $1 a show and every 2 weeks, it'd be about $25 a year. So way cheaper than a magazine subscription, and it makes all of this possible. I do not want to fund this show with advertising or sponsors. We get asked about that pretty frequently, but for a whole bunch of different reasons, which I've said many times on the show, I don't want to do that. I don't like having that stuff at the front of the show. And I also want you to know that these are authentic conversations with real people, and these are just our opinions, but our opinions are not being skewed by sponsors or advertising dollars. I think that's a pretty toxic business model. So I hope you dig that. You can support us. If you go to cloudbasedmayhem.com, you can find the places to support. You can do it through patreon.com/cloudbasedmayhem. If you want a recurring subscription, you can also do that directly through the website. We've tried to make it really easy, and that will give you access to all the bonus material, little video casts that we do and extra little nuggets that we find in conversations that don't make it into the main show, but we feel like you should hear. We don't put any of that behind a paywall. If you can't afford to support us, then just let me know and I'll set you up with an account. Of course, that'll be lifetime, and hopefully you're being in a position someday to be able to support us. But you'll find all that on the website. All of you who have supported us or even joined our newsletter or bought Cloud-Based Mayhem merchandise, t-shirts or hats or anything, you should be all set up. You should have an account and you should be able to access all that bonus material now. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support, and we'll see you on the next show. Thank you.